where you need to go next. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And I'm going to show you here in just a second where you can reach out to schedule an appointment with us for any of those things that I mentioned. But today we're going to focus on resume writing for a little while, and I have a resume template that I want to walk through with you guys. I think that will be most effective, just showing you a resume template and walking through it step by step. I don't think we'll take quite a full hour, but just depending on how many questions you all have about the template and about resume writing in general as we move forward. Here on the front end, though, give me a sense, and feel free to respond in the chat or even just unmute and let me know kind of where you're at as I ask questions. But either one will work fine for me. But where are you guys at in terms of classification? Freshman, sophomore, junior, senior? What do we have here in the room? Freshman, sophomore, mostly freshman, sophomore. Looks like great. Got a junior or two in here. Good deal. Good deal. Yeah, thanks for that, guys. So good mix here. And so I would imagine, we even have some folks that get to senior year and haven't worked on a resume yet, or still operating from a resume that they built in high school potentially. And so we're really all over the spectrum, I would assume, and where we're at in terms of resume writing. So feel free to ask me if I'm being too advanced or too basic for you guys. If you have more specific questions as we go, feel free to jump in there with a question. Again, throw it out there in the chat. Feel free to unmute and just ask me a question over the with your voice if you'd like to as well. So I do want to make sure that I'm addressing the components of resume writing that you all are most interested in. So here on the front end, are there any major questions that you have that you want to make sure I do address today regarding resume writing? And I'm fighting off kind of a bit of a cold, so I've got a cough drop in my mouth, and I'll probably jump to another one here in a second. So if I look like I'm chewing on something, that's what's going on. Okay, how to start off as a freshman when you don't have a lot of experience? Great question. We'll definitely cover that. All the basics. Never written a resume? Great. Yeah, we'll start from scratch. For sure. Anything else? Okay. Keep the questions coming as we go. And seriously, I don't mind you just jumping in there as I'm presenting. I don't mind that at all. And Joyce, if there is a question that I miss in the chat, if you wouldn't just mind bringing it to my attention, I'd really appreciate that. We also got what is too much to put on a resume type thing, like when it is adding extra unnecessary items. Great, we'll address that. Length of a resume, yep. And how do you write a CV, and when should I use it? Great, good question. So we'll definitely cover all of those things. So to start off, here's what we're going to do. I share my screen with you, and I'm going to jump online and go to Handshake. So everyone at Baylor has a Handshake account. You might not have logged in yet, but you have a Handshake account, and you can get there by going to baylor.joinhandshake.com. You've probably already gotten tons of emails from Handshake or about Handshake, but definitely want to encourage you guys to log in, because this is Baylor's career management platform. This is what we use to connect you with opportunities and resources related to job search, internship search, research opportunities, those kinds of things. And so once we're in Handshake, there's some tabs up here at the top. And if we go over here to the Career Center tab, and then we're going to scroll down to resources. Let me point this out, appointments. So if you do want to schedule an appointment with a career coach such as myself or any of the others in my office, we're all divided up by the various majors. And so you can schedule an appointment with a coach that works directly with your major, but you can schedule that here. But right next door, resources is where we're going to focus today. And these are also divided up by colleges. And regardless of what college you're in, you have access to all of these. And for today's presentation, I'm going to focus on the ones that are presented down here in the College of Arts and Sciences Science Career Resources. So there's this College of Arts and Sciences Arts, and then the College of Arts and Sciences Science Career Resources. So we're going to start right there. And these are the advisors that are dedicated to working with science students. But I also work with science students in the health and human sciences, students, folks in Robbins College, social work, music and education are the majors that I also focus on. So we have several different resume templates right here. So right off the bat, resume and cover letter tools. So we have a basic template. We have a resume template with a research section, which is the one I'm going to walk through with you all today. There's a CV with research document here that you can look at, and a resume best practices document. So let's quickly go over the differences between a resume and a CV and when to use one or the other. So for all practical purposes, uh, there's really not a difference in a resume and a CV. There are distinct differences in when you would use them, and that usually is just dependent on what an organization is asking for. So it's going to be more common for organizations that are in academics or in research to potentially ask for a CV. And most organizations that are they're working with people for an internship or a job are typically going to use a resume. And there doesn't necessarily have to be a strong difference. It's just it's just a matter of what you're using it for. So with a CV, the reason they're asking for a CV, you're probably going to be focusing more on those research experiences, on academic experiences, um, detailing all of the experiences you've had along the way. CVs will typically grow over time and get longer and longer. There's some professors at Baylor, if you go and do a search for Baylor professor CV, a lot of them are published online. You'll see some of them are 50 pages long. You don't want a resume that's 50 pages long. And at your level, again, there really isn't that much of a difference. You're not going to have a document that's multiple pages long. 1 or 2 pages, probably, until you've gotten several experiences under your belt. Then your document can grow with you. It can grow over time, but it's always something that you want to tailor to whatever it is you're working on, to whatever it is you're going for. So, in the instance that you're applying for a research type position, you want your document to focus on some of your research experiences that you've had, or any experiences you've had that convey that you're qualified to conduct that research. Same thing goes for a job. If you're applying for a job, well, your research experiences might not be the most qualifying experience that you've had. Maybe it's an internship or volunteer experience that you've had. And so in those cases, you want to focus on those areas when you're writing your resume or CV. Uh, but generally speaking, we don't really need to make an important distinction between the two. It's just a matter of what is the organization asking for. You don't have to change your document. If you have a resume and then all of a sudden they're asking for a CV, another company is asking for a CV, you probably don't have to make that many changes. It's just a difference in terminology. So having said that, we're going to jump in here and go over the resume template. So you can click on this, you can download it. You'll have to log into Box through Duo. I already have it pulled up here. So I'm just going to switch over to Microsoft Word, and this is the resume template that we're gonna look at. And I'm gonna let you see this from top to bottom how it's formatted. This is a one-page document, and a little bit about length. Um, the reason for you might have heard that your resume needs to be one page. That's not always true. It depends on the situation, but generally speaking, it's good to err on the side of being concise, being brief, um, because when you're using a resume, you're usually using it to focus on the most relevant experiences that you have for a job or for an internship. And at your level, an undergraduate, where you've maybe had a few professional experiences, limiting it to one page is probably going to be important. Now, once you've gotten several research experiences under your belt, once you've gotten several internships or some jobs, or you go to grad school, then this might transition to a 2 or 3 page document, and that's absolutely okay. But for the time being, I'm going to challenge you, encourage you to limit it to 1 page. The only exceptions are, again, if you just have more than 1 page worth of relevant experiences. If it's relevant, hey, don't cut it off. Keep it on there. Go ahead and make your resume a little bit longer. You definitely want to have one full page. You want to fill it out. You don't want a half-page resume. All of you have enough experiences because you've been alive for at least 18 years and you have enough experiences that you can communicate at least 1 page's worth of information. So you want to fill up the page, and we can definitely talk about some items to put on there if you feel like you don't have enough experience. But we've all had experiences of some kind, and we all have to start somewhere. So we just have to talk about our experiences confidently, and we have to be able to demonstrate how they've shaped us and how they've been of value to us and how they've helped us learn and grow and develop skills over time. And so that's really what the purpose of our resume is we're trying to convey relevant skills and experiences to do the next thing that we're going for. So again, whether it's research or internship or job experience, we're trying to say that yes, I can do this. And you take your cues from the description. So if you go and apply for something, there's probably some kind of description saying what they're looking for, the qualifications they're seeking, the skills they want, whether it's a job or internship. And so you take your clues from that description and you want your resume to match. You want to tailor your resume to address exactly what that organization is looking for. So that doesn't mean you make up experiences, you change your experiences, but it means you talk about your experiences in a way that matters to that organization. So to give you guys a quick example here, so let's pretend that I worked at McDonald's, and at McDonald's I do everything from cooking hamburgers, putting the cheese on the bun, operating the cash register, serving customers, and then let's say I want to go and apply for a job at In-N-Out Burger. Well, at In-N-Out Burger, they do a lot of the same things that McDonald's does, right? And so on my resume, I can talk about how I cook hamburgers and put cheese on the bun and operate the cash register and serve customers and so on. But because all that's going to be relevant, it's going to be relevant to In-N-Out Burger. But let's say I want to go and apply for a job at Walmart. Well, I've worked at McDonald's, and if I put on my resume all about how I know how to cook hamburgers and put cheese on the bun, and that's the focus, that doesn't really matter to Walmart. They don't care about that because they don't do that there. They don't cook hamburgers, but they do have customers that they serve. They have cash registers that they operate. They probably want someone who can address customers' needs, who can resolve problems, who can communicate effectively. So I'm going to talk about my experience at McDonald's in a way that matters to Walmart and to what they're looking for. So I'm going to talk about those transferable skills, those transferable duties. So again, the description of the experience that I have doesn't change, but the way I describe it to Walmart versus In-N-Out Burger is going to look very differently between the two. So let's go ahead and walk through this template here from top to bottom, just to give you guys a good idea of what to include, how to format it. So this is not the right way to format a resume. There are many formats out there that you can choose from. And I think it's important to have a resume that's formatted well, that has a nice professional look, because that's your first impression to an employer. And you want it to be a good one. You want it to be that, yes, I can format a professional looking document. I can present my information clearly in an organized fashion that's visually appealing. And that can have a big impact. Again, it's not the right way, but we've created this universal template that we use for the entire university with some different themes and different section titles depending on the major that you're in. So each one of those different colleges on that resource list will have slightly different templates, and you can go through and you can look at those and get some different ideas for content and headings. But this is not the only way to format a resume. This resume, though, has been designed with applicant tracking systems in mind. So for those of you who are not familiar with applicant tracking systems, could be something that you come across at some point. So when you go and apply for a job and you submit your resume online, sometimes companies are using what are called applicant tracking systems, which are basically just computers that are going to read your resume before actual human does. And so that computer, that software program, is going to be scanning for keywords and key experiences, dates. It's going to try to understand that you meet the minimum qualifications before you actually get your resume reviewed by a human. So it's important that your document is applicant tracking system friendly. Uh, and what I mean by that is some formatting, depending on the system, is not readable by applicant tracking system. For example, sometimes when you have a resume with two columns, sometimes the text in the second column is not readable by an applicant tracking system. So again, this was designed with applicant tracking systems in mind and should help you navigate those very easily. So starting off right here at the top, the basic information, but we have your name, and notice that the name is in larger font size and it's bolded because we want it to stand out a little bit. We've got an address, physical address. Now, nobody's going to come and knock on your door. Nobody's going to send you mail, but it's pretty common practice to still include a physical address because sometimes employers just like to see where you're from, where you've been living. It just helps put you in sort of a context. And then we have your phone number and your email address here. Absolutely necessary information to include on your resume. Then this resume has a LinkedIn profile. So I know some of you probably have a LinkedIn profile, others do not. I do encourage everyone to make one. Some of you may have heard, oh, it's just for business students. It's really not. It's really a great resource for networking and for finding people in any industry, any company out there. And so it's really good for building relationships. But in order to do that, you have to have a profile set up. So it's free, but I encourage you to go ahead and do it. And then once you have your profile set up, you'll get a unique URL, one that you can tailor with your first name and last name at the end if you'd like to, and then go ahead and plug it in on your resume. So you think of this as an online virtual resume with a professional picture, professional photo, so people can go and look and see what you've done. And you can even think of it as a more extended version of your resume. It can be a little more detailed because you can go beyond one page on your LinkedIn profile. This next section is called the career profile. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say that this is going to be optional for most of you. However, if you do want to write one, I'll tell you when it can be helpful. So in the absence of a cover letter, some jobs or internships or experiences that you might apply for, or maybe if you're reaching out to a professor directly to apply for independent research experience, you might not include a cover letter. And so this is an opportunity for you to be a little more conversational, to write in sentence form. You don't usually write in full sentence form in a resume. It's brief, concise pieces of information, lists. But in a career profile, if you had 3 to 5 sentences to speak to an employer, to speak to somebody who's going to offer you an opportunity, and describe your key attributes, your key skills, experiences, your goals, what you're going for. What would you say in those 3 to 5 sentences to grab their attention, assuming that's the only thing they're going to know about you? And so that can help you think about what to include there. But this is an example here. So biochemistry candidate with experience in independent research and advanced laboratory techniques, including mass spectrometry, excuse me, that's a difficult word, gel electrophoresis and protein chromatography. Experience working in cross-functional teams with the ability to develop and deliver quality presentations and documentation. Strong communicator that makes decisions quickly and accurately. So that gives you an idea of the type of information you could potentially include in a career profile. These are difficult to write well. And this is something that you definitely want to be tailored to the individual experience that you're going for. You don't want to talk about how great you are at cooking hamburgers and then give this to Walmart. You want to tailor it to what Walmart is looking for. So think about that. But again, opportunity to be a little more conversational in the absence of a cover letter type of situation. But this is your first mandatory, absolutely necessary, required section of a resume. So this is the education section. And typically, if you're working on a second degree, maybe you have an associate's degree or maybe you have earned some kind of certificate, or you've done a study abroad or something like that. You can list those educational experiences in reverse chronological order. So within sections, we typically we go in reverse chronological. So starting with the most recent or current, and then working our way back in time down the list. And so first and foremost, what we have here is our education at Baylor University. So you will all have that. And this one has Baylor University listed here in bold letters with city and state. This is the anticipated grad date, or the grad date if it's in the past tense. And we can even write out. For some of you, it might be better to do something like this: write out anticipated. And that can be a good way to clarify that you're still in school, anticipated or expected. And then you want to have your degree. And funny enough, I see the degree missing from a lot of resumes. And you have to be aware that there's also master's degrees and doctoral programs at Baylor. So we want to specify that you're working on a bachelor's degree and a bachelor of whatever that might be. I think I saw a question come up. Gotcha. I think that's for Joyce. And then information about your major. And sometimes I like to even do this just to clarify the major and then minor and put labels on them. So again, there's lots of different ways you could do that and separate your information. And this is something I want you all to think about in terms of how to organize a section on a resume. You want to put the most relevant information on top and to the left and in bold letters. You want that information to stand out. So in this case, we would assume that Baylor University is the most important piece of information in the section. I happen to disagree with that. I think the fact that you're probably working on a bachelor's degree, bachelor's science in this case, if you're applying for research, might be more important, especially if you're going for an outside organization that might not be familiar with Baylor. And so we could put bachelor of science, for example, and maybe the major, we could put that first. And we can even put the dates up here next to bachelor of science, just to keep them on the top. So there's not one right way to organize this, but again, think about what you feel like is most important, because when a reader is looking down the page, their eyes are going to be drawn to the first line, to that first piece of information in bold letters. And so you want that to be something that's going to be attention grabbing. GPA is something you can include. If it's a strong GPA, something you're proud of, go ahead and put it on there. If not, you don't have to. It's completely optional. Another option would be for you to include a major GPA. So maybe your GPA within biochemistry in this case is stronger than your overall GPA. Maybe some of those Spanish classes brought your GPA down. Well, that would be a reason for you to maybe market your major GPA. And so instead of overall, we just put major GPA and then whatever that happens to be. So think of this, guys, as your marketing document. This is your advertisement, and you get to write it. You get to put whatever about yourself you feel like is the strongest component, it's the most attractive for a particular opportunity, and you get to put that there. And if you don't want to put something on there, you don't have to put it on there. So somebody asked, should we avoid using color? Yes, absolutely. There's a few exceptions. Now, for the more creative fields, maybe something in art or PR, marketing, some of those things, sometimes showcasing some of your creativity through your resume could be valuable. But generally speaking, for virtually everything else, you just want it to be plain old boring, black and white, no fancy designs, no fancy lettering, just a plain professional looking resume. And one of the reasons for not including color, even though color can be used professionally, is ultimately we're still printing a lot of resumes, and it's probably going to be printed in black and white. And when it's printed in black and white, it's going to that blue or whatever you use, that red, is going to turn into a shade of gray, and it's not going to look the same. It's not going to look as great as it did. But generally speaking, we want to stick to black and white on a resume. So let's talk a little bit about how to showcase some of your experiences that might be most relevant for that thing to which you're applying. And so most of you have probably seen that, okay, we go from education to experience. And when we think of experience, we typically think of work experience, right? And you might think, well, my work experience that I've had just isn't relevant. Maybe I haven't worked at McDonald's or worked at Walmart or worked as a server somewhere, and that's not relevant to research. And that's okay to include. If that's the only experience you have, then absolutely, by all means, you have to talk about it, and you have to talk about how it's impacted you and why it's mattered and how it's helped you grow as a person and a professional. And everyone has to start somewhere. So at some point, you're going to have to submit a resume with virtually no direct relevant experience on it, and that's okay. You just have to talk about the experiences that you've had in a dynamic way. Check the chat really quick here. Okay. And so I wanted to challenge you to think about other ways that you can showcase experiences that you've had. So in this case, this resume builds in a research experience. So when you do gain some of that research experience, this is a way you can build it into your resume right here. So we can have research experience, then we'll come down. And whenever you're talking about it, an experience, we want to give it some kind of name. So this names the project, gives the date ranges that this person participated in it, and it has a brief description of what that project was. And then it has a title, a job title. So in this case, this person was a research fellow. And then we have bullet points underneath it. And so we typically want to use bullet points under our content, not just full sentence or paragraph style, but these individual bullet points, usually starting with a strong action verb of some kind. These are not complete sentences. These are brief thoughts to the point, highlighting what we did in that experience, relevant duties, talking about skills that you developed. So what are some skills that you employed, some skills that you grew in, some skills that you developed, whether it's soft skills or technical skills, like a software you used or type of equipment that you use. So if you're in a lab equipment that you know how to use, that kind of thing. If you were in some other kind of experience that required a lot of attention to detail, then you talk about the transferable skill of attention to detail. But then again, focusing on the tasks, skills, and then results, outcomes, accomplishments, anything that you did well. You also want to try to quantify your experiences when you're talking about them in these bullet points. How many people did you work with? How much money did you save? Um, how much did you increase whatever you increased? How much did you decrease something? Trying to quantify the work that you did in some way can be helpful. Go back to the chat again. Do I only include research experience from college or also from high school? So let's think about this. So from your perspective, high school, that was a while back. A few years down the road, when you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s, 2 or 3 years ago, it's not that long ago. And so a few years ago in high school just isn't that long. And so it's absolutely okay. It's not old. It's not too old to include on your resume. The big question that you want to ask yourself is it relevant? And if it's relevant, I don't care if it happened when you were 2 years old, put it on your resume. Absolutely, include it on there. Anything that's helped you grow as a professional, things that you were involved with extensively through high school or hey, even middle school, especially those things that are directly relevant to what it is you're going for next. Absolutely include them. So if it is not relevant and it's older, those are the things that you might want to start cutting off your resume. First, build out your resume. If it goes past 2 pages, ask yourself the question, are there some things on here that aren't relevant? Cut off the non-relevant things first. And then you want to ask yourself, are these just older things? Do I have more recent experiences that are more impressive, that help communicate the breadth and depth of my skills and abilities? And absolutely, go ahead and cut off some of the older stuff. But your first question is it relevant? Do I want to include it on there if it's relevant or not? So if it's not research experience, another way to think about this is relevant coursework. So maybe you've taken some courses at Baylor that sometimes your most valuable experience, your most direct experience for something that you're applying for comes from your coursework. So let's say you're a biochemistry major and you haven't really done any biochem research, but you want to apply for a biochem research position, but you've taken some classes where you've done some lab work and that kind of thing, and you've learned, and maybe you worked on a particular project in one of your biochem classes that you feel like, hey, that experience that I had in that class, I think that really helped prepare me for this research experience that I'm applying for. Well, don't just let them assume that because you're a biochem major that you've had that course and that you gained from that experience. Go ahead and detail it out. Again, this is where you want to detail the things that are most relevant to what you're going for. So instead of doing that, then maybe we're gonna use I'm going to use the course name, and then we're gonna do the date that I was a part of that. So maybe that was fall 2019. And we won't have a full date range. Maybe we'll just have a semester on there. And then you could maybe offer a brief description of the course and the fact that you were a student in the course. And then for your bullet points, you might talk about what you learned, what you did in the course, describe that project, describe what you took away, describe how it impacted you. Again, if it's relevant for the thing that you're applying for, by all means, put some relevant coursework on there. You're not just limited to those paid experiences or those internship type experiences, but really anything. Experience just means anything that's given you the experience to do what it is you're going for next, and that's what you want to showcase on your resume. So let's see here. If I have a high school experience, should I indicate that it's from high school or just include the year I did it? Yeah, it doesn't really matter that it was high school or not. Just include the year that you did it, just the dates, and that will be absolutely fine. What's most important is that um, you describe the value. If you list anything on your resume, ask yourself the question, why does this matter? And then make sure you're talking about why it mattered through those bullet points. Don't list on anything on your resume that didn't matter. We all have a tendency to want to include everything on our resume because everything that we've experienced did matter to us. It helps shape who we are, but we have to ask, does it matter to the person that I'm writing to? If I'm applying for something, the first thing that they're going to look for are those relevant experiences. And so if I'm applying for this biochemistry research experience, they don't really care that I played tennis in high school. That doesn't matter. That doesn't mean don't put that on there, but it might be more of a byline way down at the bottom. And if it makes your resume go over one page, definitely don't include it on there. But we're going to try to focus exclusively on the relevant experiences as much as possible until you just don't have those things to talk about. Another way to think about this is maybe we just have a projects section. So maybe we have multiple projects that we've worked on in some of our classes that we want to highlight. And so same thing, we could just name the project and use those bullet points to describe why it mattered, what we did, what we learned, those kinds of things. So there's a lot of different creative ways to showcase your experiences and content on this resume. So don't feel limited by these section titles. You put on there what you've done and what's going to matter to that thing that you're applying to. So let me move on down to the experience section. So experience is typically, what we mean by that is work experience, but it doesn't have to be. Again, experiences are any of your life's experiences that have taught you a certain skill set. So let's say you are applying for a position and they want somebody who has exceptional communication skills, for example. And you think, well, you know what? I was a part of a student organization called Burst on campus, and through Burst, I developed my written communication skills. And so you might showcase that experience here. So maybe instead of the job, maybe we have Burst and you were a member, and that took place at Baylor University in Waco, Texas, and the date ranges over here. And then again, maybe put some bullet points under here describing that experience. and describing why it mattered, what you did, what you learned, what you took away. You say a quick point about bullet points. You notice up here, these experiences have 3 bullet points. These have 2. There's not a right number. It really matters. What matters is how extensive was that experience? How much do you have to say about it? How relevant was that experience? So for those experiences that were very relevant, they were directly relevant to the job, to the experience you're applying for, maybe you'll have 5 or 6 bullets. For the things that just weren't that relevant, weren't that significant, maybe only 1 or 2 bullets. Uh, Again, don't think you have to be limited to a certain number. Just focus on what's relevant. Give more attention, more detail, more bullets to the things that are more relevant. Less attention to the things that are less relevant. But notice here again, if we're talking about work experiences, we have a job title, company name, city, state, and then date ranges over here with a little bit of information down at the bottom. So let's move on down the page. And on this particular resume, what we've done is we've developed this additional section. It's just a generic name to lump things together. This is the supporting information. This is not necessarily what's going to get you the job, because these are not the relevant experiences. But this is just a little bit of extra information that you may want to include that might not fit in other places. So think of things like language abilities. We think of things like maybe a list of skills, usually technical skills. Don't list soft skills like communication, problem solver, good communicator, critical thinker, attention to detail, those kinds of things. Anybody can list those on your resume. It's more important for you to think about how you can give examples of those skills throughout your resume through these experiences, but you can list things like technical skills. So that's software, languages, laboratory equipment, those kinds of things, any certifications that you might have. This is also a place to potentially list awards, scholarships, those kinds of things. If you like, you can even be more specific. Again, we can have any. You don't have to have an additional section. Some people are going to have a volunteer work section. Some people are going to have a volunteer, maybe activities, like a student activities, or we could lump those together and do activities and volunteer work. So whatever it is you want to include in these sections, make sure your section titles reflect what's in them as accurately as possible. If it's just this random hodgepodge of information, additional is absolutely fine to include, but try to be accurate with those heading descriptions whenever possible. Another note on formatting: until I started messing with the dates, these dates should have been aligned over to the right. And in bold letters, notice the dates are going to be spelled out. We're not going to use 5/17 to present or 6/16 to 5/17. We're going to spell out those dates because that helps them with being applicant tracking system friendly, with a hyphen in the middle to separate them. If it's something you're currently working on, then we say present. But we can just space those dates over to the right to help them be right aligned up and down the page. Okay, all. Well, that's pretty much the resume template, and that's the content, what to include, some ideas of what you might try. And it's going to look different from person to person. But what questions do you all have about resume writing in general, or even your own specific questions unique to your situation? I'm glad to try to fill those here as well.
I had a really quick question about the career profile. So that's
Yeah.
going to be tailored to specifically wherever you're applying,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So good idea to read that job description, what they're looking for. If they want somebody who's a really good communicator, then talk up your communication skills and talk out an achievement. Maybe you you received a recognition from a supervisor because of your outstanding communication. Maybe you made a difference in someone's life because you communicated with them effectively. So really talk out those skills and attributes, strengths, experiences that matter. So focusing on the communications theme, excellent communicator, effective in communicating with customers around their needs. Maybe you work as a server, so you could talk about the number of customers that you communicate with on a daily basis and how you meet their needs. And then end potentially by saying what you're going for, working towards this particular position with this goal in mind, something along those lines.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question. What else? What other questions do you all have? So I want to highlight here that I'm definitely available to work with you one-on-one with the resume writing. So if you're just building it from scratch and you need some support, glad to do that. If you've already written one, or if you want to work on one and then send it to me to review and edit, glad to do that. Just let me know whatever I can do to be helpful for you guys. Any other questions about content, formatting, what to include in a particular situation?